Shalom from Jerusalem. In our week's Parsha, Truma, we are taught about the commandment of building a sanctuary for God. Vasuli migdash v'shachanti betucham. You shall build a temple, so I shall dwell amongst you. Interesting to note, in this week's Parsha, all the particulars about how to build the tabernacle and the temple later on are all found in one Parsha. Vasuli menorah, you shall make the menorah. You shall make the table for the showbreads. You shall make the ark. You shall make, you shall do, you shall build. If you had to take a guess, just how many times does God command us in this Parsha that you shall do, you shall make, you shall build? How many times does God go over this same theme? If you had to guess, maybe you would say 10 times, 20 times, maybe 30 times, 40 times. The truth is, it's a lot more than that. In our small Parsha of building the temple, over 140 times does God repeat again and again, telling us, you shall do, you shall build, and you shall make. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that this command is obviously in our hands to do. And people obviously sat and did and built the tabernacle just like they did the first temple and the second temple. It's unfortunate today that we hear from so many people. Can't build the temple, don't know how to do it, don't know the particulars, don't know where it's supposed to be. The Torah is teaching us in a completely different theme. The Torah is teaching us it's in your hands to do. You could build it, you could do it. So too we find with the altar. When the altar was complete and Aaron, the high priest, brought sacrifice, there was no fire. Fire would descend from heaven. But in order for that to happen, Aaron first had to light the match and bring it to the altar. Without doing that, the fire did not descend from heaven. It was only after Aaron took the first step, the first action, did fire descend. There must be an action and awakening upon man himself. And this theme we find throughout the entire Torah, because the Jewish people, so to speak, are partners with God in the completing of creation itself. And in creation itself, the jewel, the crown of creation, is the temple. See, that's what I'm talking about. We find that the Talmud teaches us. God says, I will not enter the heavenly Jerusalem until the Jewish people enter the earthly Jerusalem. That means until there is an awakening amongst the Jewish people, until the Jewish people start to rebuild Jerusalem and want to have a will to go up and to build a temple. Only then does God enter his heavenly temple, heavenly Jerusalem. There must first be an awakening amongst the Jewish people. Without the action, nothing will help. Nothing will be done. And so we find that when the Jewish people returned in the second temple period, after the 70 years of exile from Babylonian, Ezra and Nehemiah came to Israel, and the first thing that they did was start to construct the temple itself. You might say, at this point they had the prophecy of how the temple has to be from the book of Ezekiel. The last 9 chapters of Ezekiel talk about the temple, how the third temple has to be. But to the people at the time, as it is today, a lot of it was unclear exactly how this all fits together. Excuses they had. We don't understand the prophecy. We can't do it. There's no Messiah yet. It has to come down from heaven. Excuses there's always, because we know the gates of excuses are always open. When a person wants an excuse, there's always an excuse why not to do it. But that wasn't the case of the Jews who returned in the second temple period. They went immediately to construct the temple, and even though they had many hardships, and for many years there was a stop order that they couldn't continue the work of the temple, they eventually got the job done, even though it took them some 20, 30 years. But the job got done, because it must be done by us. This is what the Parsha is teaching us. Va'asu li migdash, you shall make for me a temple. Rashi, Rambam bring this down, that this command is not just for the tabernacle, which journeyed with the Jewish people for the continuous time that they were in the desert for 40 years, but this command is forever. It's for eternity. There always has to be work done and a desire to rebuild the temple, as our rabbis teach us. That in every generation, if the temple is not built, is as if it is destroyed. And so there must be an awakening in every generation to rebuild the temple. This is what the Parsha is teaching us. And that's why the Rambam, Maimonides, brings down the smallest details of when we build a temple. For instance, he says, you don't build a temple at night. You don't build a temple during the holidays or during Shabbos. Small children cannot partake of the building of the temple. If it's something that's coming down from heaven, or we have to wait for Messiah, then why all the details? The case is, the Torah is teaching us something totally different. The Torah is teaching us this is a command. Commands is something that we have to do. The rabbis teach us that a person who just learns and doesn't do any action is better than he didn't learn at all. But there has to be learning, but learning must lead to action. This is what Judaism is all about. If we sat in the exile for 2,000 years, we wouldn't get anywhere except that there was an awakening and the Jews came back to the land of Israel, and with sweat and with pain, and many people died of diseases. The land was built up to get to what we have today. But without taking that first step, without actually doing, we would be lost. That's what the Torah is teaching us over here. Be partners with creation. Today, we find around us a lot of chaotic events that are happening. In a very short period of time, Egypt, within a week, is in chaos, and we don't know what will be tomorrow. Will the Muslim Brotherhood take over? Will there be more extremists in the area? Yemen, Tunisia, they're all being upheavaled. They're all being revolutions over there, and we don't know what's going to be. Very frightening times. The Midrash already tells us that when the complete redemption comes, when it's the time of Messiah, there'll be many crazy events that will happen in the world that will be very frightening. God says to the Jewish people, do not worry. All that I am doing for your sake, to bring the redemption, to bring you home to the land of Israel, and to rebuild God's house. The prophet Haggai teaches us, how long will you dwell in your well-secured houses while the house of God lays in ruins? We sit around, we have our estates, we plan our vacations for Passover, we go to Florida, Bermuda, wherever we go. And no one thinks twice that the house of God lays in ruins. So God will bring around events for this to occur, whether we participated or not. Our lesson over here in the Parsha is so clear. Over 140 times God tells us, you shall do, you shall build, you shall make. Coming to teach us a simple lesson, we must do it ourselves. Not to wait, it's not up there, it's not falling. Action. Jews must take action. That's what we find in the Jerusalem Talmud. That the temple will be rebuilt, and only 40 years afterwards will we find Messiah dancing on the roof of that temple. Coming to teach us that the temple will be rebuilt before Messiah comes. This is the lesson, and that's what I'm talking about. Jews must participate in creation, and we have a command. What's a command? A command is something that was given to us by God to do. If it was out of our hands, if it was impossible to do, it wouldn't be a command. But the mere fact that it is a command to build a house for God, it obviously means that we can do it. We can succeed. We must take the first step, and of course, we'll have Sata Dishmaya, we'll have God's help coming down to help us. This is what the Parsha is teaching us. Vasuli Migdash, V'shachanti betocham. Make a temple that I will dwell amongst you. Let's take the first step. Let's prepare. Let's get going. Get the wood, get the stones. This is the only way that we will get the job done. I'm Levi Chazen from Yeshivat Ra'anu Yehudi in Yerushalayim.